out, and away we go.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Formula One True North. I'm here with Drew, Ed, maybe Thomas. We'll see. Bit of a cliffhanger. We'll see if he can get his internet working over the bunker. And we are here talking about the Canadian Grand Prix. Yes, we just finished up in Montreal. A lot of people are saying it was the race of the season so far, with Max back on top. Drew, tell me, is this a blip on the radar, or is he holding that number one spot for good now?
I think this was the first weekend that we got to see Max having to earn that again. Like, this was not a given race for him. Max had to take a Q2 car and push it. And, you know, this is where you see somebody like George Russell, who's not used to being in first place or catching a pole position. And you're seeing him not be able to handle that pressure, where Max thrives under this. He's like, perfect, give me a Q2 car and let me show you how this is done. And obviously, you know, there was a couple things that went Red Bull's way, because Red Bull as a team made some serious calls and they were all the right ones. And, you know, that's true to form for Red Bull, because they've been really good at making calls. And, you know, that kind of, they played that safety car very well, and McLaren didn't. And so that kind of allowed them to take advantage of a situation where, you know, McLaren had the time. Like, there was a 300-meter gap where Lando could have pulled into the pits and made that same pit stop. And I think we'd be talking about a very different ending to the Montreal Grand Prix. But, you know, the short answer to your question, do I think this is a blip on the radar? I don't know. No, it's not. I think Max Verstappen and Red Bull have hit that kind of plateau mark, and there's a lot of teams like McLaren, obviously Ferrari. This is a bad weekend to call for them, but now you even have a team like Mercedes that are making the upgrades. That the changes are happening in a very, very big way, and Red Bull's not sitting as pretty as they used to be. So I don't know. That's kind of what I got on the Canadian Grand Prix this weekend. What do you got on that one, Ed?
Well, I actually agree with what Gunther Steiner said, I think it was a few weeks ago, that it's not that Red Bull is having a problem. It's that everyone's just catching up now. After the dominance that has been like the past 2 years of Red Bull, now I think what they're really doing is they're trying to stay away from the attention of putting more emphasis on their new car, and now focusing on the 2026 rule changes. So at this point, like, make the long story short, and as I said from the last podcast that we have, last episode, is that this would be a good chance to now see where Red Bull is. And yeah, they have, as you said, they have plateaued. Everyone's catching up, and now it's going to be an interesting season.
You know, I think you both bring up a really good point, and I think over the last few years, what we've become so used to is to have this absolute crushing dominance in the sport, where Red Bull is just destroying week after week after week. And we forget quickly that, you know, even during the dominant Mercedes years, yes, they won constructors, yes, Lewis won a driver's championship, but there was still competition in the field. And I think that's what we're starting to see. And I think a lot of the cars are coming back to Red Bull right now. And, you know, to your point, Ed, I think it's more about the rest of the field catching up, because at some point you're going to hit that terminal velocity on that car, and you're only going to be able to go so far, make so many tweaks, so many improvements. And it's really, really refreshing to see Max and Red Bull have to work for victories. You know, yes, they won, but am I mad about them winning this one? No, not really, because it was a well-earned victory. He wasn't out 30 seconds in front. He wasn't, you know, it was something that was earned, and it was something that was well-deserved. You know, yes, he got the safety car. He didn't get that luck in Miami, right? So a little bit of payback there, or I guess reversal of fortunes with Lando. So lots going on. It was a very eventful race. Beyond Max winning, you had obviously the Ferraris, which just did not have a good weekend at all from the jump.
Yeah.
You know, talk about blips on the radar, right? Is this their little blip? Is this just like their off week where they just completely shit the bed on everything, like the car, the management, the strategy, or are they returning to a form in which we saw in previous years where they just couldn't get their act together?
when you have both Ferraris going out in Q2, like that's not a good look. Like that car from this season, like that's a race winning car in a big way. Like they're not losing by a lot, like in the Constructors Championship. Like these guys are close. And it just baffles me that they come off such a strong weekend in Monaco to go into Canada and lose everything. Like it was a bad look on everything. Like they just didn't seem to have anything dialed. And as soon as FP1 and FP2 happened, obviously FP1 was a little bit of a mess because of the rain and stuff. But like when they got into FP3 on Saturday and they had some clear air, like that car was not dialed in. So I don't know what happened between Monaco and Canada. Like they're both heavy curb tracks, and like in my eyes, I thought it should have been a walk on. Like I don't remember exactly what our predictions were, but like Ferrari was far and away, I thought, ahead of McLaren this weekend, and definitely ahead of Mercedes. So I don't know what was going on there. I hope this is just a blip on the radar for these guys, because I think that that Ferrari has some great stuff cooking, and Freddie Vasseur has way higher expectations for their guys on a week out basis, and this was not it. So I think, I don't know, they just dropped the ball on this one in a big way, and I hope they recover for Spain. What do you got on that one, Ed?
Well, according to Fred Vasseur, in one of his interviews, was that the issue that really destroyed the entire weekend for them was the engine. Give or take, that they lost about 80 horsepower on the vehicle. And he didn't really go into detail on what was the issue. Was it the MGUH, MGUK, or was it the actual like ICE engine? He didn't really go into that, but in essence, Ferrari's not really built for like long straights. They're good for low to medium speed corners, and they can compete with the likes of Red Bull and even McLaren in terms of like straight line speed. In the next few races, there's going to be a lot of those like straight line speeds. I mean, in Spain, they took out the final what do you call this, the chicane, and made that long sweeping turn. Ferrari might be good at that end, but like specifically for Canada, they had so many issues, and it kind of like reminded me during the final years of Mattia Binotto and the clowns that are the strategists, or the interns that are the strategists within the pit wall. So Fred Vasseur probably had like a field day with those guys, and someone's going to be in trouble for the next few races. And if they don't, firm up, they're going to be either taking the can, because Fred Vasseur does not want to do anything with any type of incompetence. He's cleared house. He's brought in a few, very well trained and well respected great minds in Formula One, and we'll see what happens. But yeah, it was definitely not a good look for them this weekend.
I feel like Fred is a very interesting character in Formula One, because he has like this air of just being like this fun-loving, smiling. I feel like everyone in the paddock loves him, but I feel like he has just a complete cutthroat and a ruthless side to him, where, to your point, Ed, and I don't know this, I'm just guessing, right? Because I feel like he plays that duality, right, where he just does not take shit. Like, he's the nicest guy until he's not, right? And you do not want to get on his bad side. But I think
like the Tony Soprano of the pit wall.
There
like
you
he's
go.
Just like,
yes,
yeah, he's like a gangster. Like he's just like, he's so nice, and like he's, gives the donations, he's hugging, kissing, he knows everybody, but like you mess with him and it's a wrap.
Yeah,
you don't do your job, you're in trouble.
Yeah, I love the way he interacts with Toto. Like, he does not take Toto seriously at all. There's like this big, like 6'4" Austrian dude. Everyone, he's like so serious, and he's just like fucking poking them there like a bear. Like, you know what I mean? He's just like having fun with everybody.
His cheeks.
Grabbing his cheeks until you get on his bad side. Anyways, that's a side note. Let's switch over to Mercedes, because I'm excited to talk about Mercedes for a couple of reasons. It's nice to talk about them in a positive light for once. They've had a rough go. We've documented it extensively, and now they've had a weekend where they've seen some success. There are a couple of different angles I want to talk about Mercedes right now. First is, let's reflect on George, his performance this weekend. Interestingly enough, both drivers were pretty critical of their performances post-race, which was interesting given the success that they did have. Maybe that's because they knew there was so much more there. I want to touch on George, though, because as we know, he has let pressure get the best of him a couple of times. And while he didn't have something catastrophic happen in Montreal, there were still times where, he was losing the car, going off track, mind you, difficult conditions. But first question is, does he have that killer instinct yet as a driver where he's able to dial in and completely dominate when need be?
So I'm going to touch on this one. Okay, is there a second part before I get started on this one? Because that's a great question.
There is, and but I want to hear this answer first, and then we're gonna follow it up with part two.
All right. So George is one of those guys, and I find most people are like this, especially people in high pressure sports or things like this. People that are great at their job. Obviously, he's great because, well, he's one of the 20 best drivers in the world. So let's start with that. But you have the two type of people where you have people who absolutely rise to the occasion, and then there's people who drop down to their highest training, right? So they just kind of catch this wave, like a tunnel vision, and if it's something that's outside of their norm, they don't know how to react positively to it. So when then you brought up a great point, Walker, when you're talking about the weather or some outside conditions that were not normal, George didn't know what to do. He seems to cave under pressure in a big way during monumental moments, where the opposite happens with someone like Max Verstappen or Lewis Hamilton or Fernando Alonso. These people that will be remembered as greats, those people rise to the occasion and they find oh, this is when everyone else is going to struggle. I'm going to murder this and everything's going to be awesome. And so that's where I think George is being left behind. I don't know if I've seen that out of somebody like Lando Norris yet, or Oscar Piastri, or some of these other young guns. But even somebody like Esteban Ocon and Pierre Gasly, Alex Albon's another one of those guys who rises to the occasion. I just thought this was an opportunity for George to do that, and I didn't see it out of him. And he mentioned that a few times, like you talked about in the post race stuff, where not even the post race, it was immediately after the race was over, he's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, guys, I screwed up." And like you mentioned, Lewis said the same thing. But I just don't know if he's got a championship mentality. I don't know if he's a future champion.
I mean, I agree with that, but George has been under the shadow of Lewis Hamilton since he started his career, even back when he drove for Lewis when Lewis got COVID. So there was a bunch of, slight glimmers of brilliance when George did that for Lewis. I think that was in Abu Dhabi. But the antithesis of that is last year in Singapore, when he was taking it to Carlos Sainz and he made one big mistake and then hit the wall. He was I think second or third. He had podium, and it was a few laps left at the end of the race, and he was really pushing it, really trying to get the win. But yeah, something happened, big mistake or overcorrection or a big error in his part, and he crashed and destroyed the entire race for the team. So I think what we're trying to look for in George is that killer instinct, that the killer mentality, and rising up to the occasion under pressure. I think next year would be a good a good indicator of who he really is, because now he's not going to be under Lewis Hamilton's shadow. He could be or may not be, depending on who the next driver would be for Mercedes. He could be driver number one. So we'll see what happens next year, and we'll see how he responds to it. I mean, even Toto, during the entire race, Toto got on the radio and said, "George, relax. George, focus." So that to me kind of tells you a little bit about who George is. He does crack under pressure. He doesn't have that killer mentality. He doesn't have that focus yet. And when things start to get tough, he breaks. So we'll see. Next year, we'll see how he performs with another teammate.
So as we're talking this through, I'm kind of going through different scenarios of how I'm viewing this, right? And to one extent, we're talking about George not being able to kind of maintain focus, and he's making these little mistakes here and there, which are costing him places, and in some case podiums, and in some case he just wrecks the car. Flipping that around, looking at it from the other side, is that the driver that you want driving for you? Do you want somebody who is so close to being on the edge every time that, you know, they make these mistakes, that they hit these walls, right? And at what point does that go from being a driver on the edge who's really trying to push to just somebody who's being reckless? You know, we've seen lots of drivers who maybe don't have the success or don't have the pedigree or aren't in the teams that are just, you know, quote unquote, on the edge every time, but they put the car constantly into the wall, right? So I feel like it's when you're at that level, when you have these drivers, how close to that edge do you want them being every time? And do you want someone like George pushing that envelope to find every last millisecond around that track versus someone playing it safe? And then, sure, you don't crash, you don't make any mistakes, but you're also not fighting for podiums. It's a tough balance. And I think you have to know the driver a little bit better. You know, having Toto come on here and say onto the radio and say, George, focus, I think that maybe leads you to believe that, you know, getting him a little bit more settled is one of the tasks at hand for him personally, you know, being in those higher pressure situations. But I don't know if you want someone taking it easy and just coasting around either. You know, then you have Bottas maybe on your hands, arguably. The second part to that question, and Ed, you kind of led into it nicely, was it can be argued this year, and maybe even last year, that George has outperformed Lewis from a pure, maybe not last year in terms of points, but this year certainly. In terms of points, qualifying, certainly, that George has outperformed Lewis. Is there a power shift happening at Mercedes where George is the number one driver? Are things shifting that way given the performance? We're all Lewis fans here, so let's take a deep breath. Let's try and be objective, like the journalist, professional journalists that we are. What are your thoughts?
All right. Well, the thing is like Lewis Hamilton has signed his contract with Ferrari, so he's out the door. And so they're going to give, you know, Lewis all the respect that he deserves and has earned over the 7 championships that he's won with Mercedes. But the reality is the future is George Russell. And so as they're modifying and improving and coming up with all these parts and upgrades for their car throughout this season and into next season, they're not gearing the upgrades towards Lewis anymore. And if they have half of the upgrades, they're going to try it out with George before they do anything with Lewis, because, you know, they obviously want to give Lewis all the opportunity they can to score points because he's, you know, he has the pedigree. He is a point scorer. He is a champion. He knows how to drive in a big way. But I think that, you know, they have to give George every piece, every tool, everything that he needs in order to become a race winner and the number one seed. Because if Andrea Kimi Antonelli is the next person, which they've, you know, clearly made obvious over the last couple weeks at Mercedes to take that second seed, George needs to be the leader, and he needs to have something, you know, to work with in order for them to have any sort of success going into next season. So I don't know if it's a case of, you know, George becoming the number one seed. I think he is. I think that is it, you know, because Lewis has already made that agreement with Ferrari. He's out of here. And so they have to put all their eggs into the George basket in order for them to kind of bet on their future.
No, I'm with you there. And George has been, you know, giving us like glimmers of his brilliance and his speed and his pace in the past 2 seasons. Like, there has been instances wherein George outqualifies Lewis, or George is able to make podium versus Lewis, and even become even faster and take take a higher place compared to Lewis. And that's where it kind of like boils down to like how would he really perform? How would he represent himself as the number one driver, as the guy that's going to carry um the banner of Mercedes? Well, to answer your question, Walker, like at this point, like yeah, he is number one, and the focus now I think is really on developing George, giving him a little bit more confidence. I mean, it kind of shows with the tire selection for this weekend too. We all knew and we all saw, and you were there, Walker. Like Lewis had pace. He could have made podium and a bit more if he really wanted to, but he didn't have the tire for it. And Bono said, like, we think that it's a good tire. We just need to get more heat into it. Lewis exactly said, no, I don't see that. I feel that, mediums are going to be better. And then towards the end of the race, I don't know if anyone caught that. Like Bono was kind of like, telling Lewis, at least you had you got a good showing for the weekend. And Lewis didn't even respond. So like it kind of shows now that, okay, fine. I'm all the way out here, but if this is how you guys are going to treat me, then all right, I know what it is. I know what I'm going to take to next season. So sad to say, like it is an end of an era, but it was good when it lasted.
Let's move on to the rest of the field. So aside from the top three, we know Verstappen. We haven't touched on Norris and McLaren, and I feel like they're just kind of like the boring team to talk about right now because they're kind of consistent and there, and we can talk about them a lot later, right? Moving on to the rest of the field, I want to touch on, or I want to get your winners and losers for the weekend. Drivers, teams, really quickly. Drew, winner, loser, who do you got?
Winner, Haas with the wet tires off the start. Like, we need to acknowledge that in this episode. This is ridiculous. Like, those guys were playing chess when everybody else was playing checkers. That very quickly fell apart, obviously, when this track started to dry up and we realized that Haas was trying to pull this off and that was impossible. But I thought that was a big brain strategy going on there. And yeah, we got to give hats off to Haas. Big losers, I'm going to leave Ferrari alone on this one because I think they already got beat up a little bit. I'm going to go with Williams, I think, on some of the big losers there because they were looking quite good. Like, if you had Logan Sargent, like, out of Q1, what's going on? You know what I mean? So, yeah, the Williams were looking great, but I think that I don't know if it was just a lack of experience in the wet weather, but Logan and Albon obviously spinning out at the end and taking out everybody. It was a mess. So yeah, those are quick winners and losers out of me.
Winners for me I know that we said that McLaren was boring, expected. I think they were a win for me because I did mention in my predictions last episode that it was going to be Leclerc, Piastri, and Norris. So I'm kind of happy that they were up there. But the second part of that, for losers for me, actually would be Haas. Like, they had the opportunity to win. They had the opportunity to capitalize on that pace that they had. You saw Kevin Magnussen just destroying the entire field. What happened? And I'm like, okay, fine. The rain kind of stopped. If Komatsu saw that, immediately, what do we do next? We're seeing this now. This is happening real time. Let's get the strategy up. They didn't do nothing. Absolutely nothing. Kevin Magnussen started at 14th, ended the race at 12th. I would have expected him to be in the points. No points. I mean, it was such a wasted opportunity. I was so happy for K-Mag and so sad at the same time towards the end of the race. But yeah, those are my winners and losers.
I keep trying to think of the right analogy for Haas, like how they operate, and I haven't been able to really nail it. My latest analogy is they're kind of, when you've had like too much to drink or something like that, and you're just like really short sighted, and something seems like a really good idea at the time. You're like, F it, let's just go and do it and see what happens. I feel like that's how they operated this weekend, and just I feel like that's how they just operate all
In
the
general.
time. And it's kind of fun, and it's kind of like rogue, and they're carrying the spirit of Gunther Steiner with them into this season. And I like how they're operating. I think it's fun, it's interesting, and it makes the races entertaining, if nothing else. But they think about like the first 10 laps, and then they're like, oh, we'll figure the rest out. And I feel like that's where they're kind of. I feel like if they could get beyond that, they could be quite competitive and fun to watch. Really quickly, loser for the weekend is going to be Checo. He's had a rough couple of races. Signed a big not big he signed a contract, got an extension, and he's just like putting his feet up. He's like, well, my work here is done. Thank you very much. Winners for the weekend. I want to, maybe we can touch on them a little bit later. I think, what are they called? Visa, Cash App. They had a really good showing. Sonoda finally got a contract extension, which is nice. Rick had a nice qualifying, at least a decent race. Winners for the weekend, though, I'm going to say Alpine. They're just like the bickering little couple sitting back there. They ended up with some points, which was, I guess, fun. Ocon is all bitter and not happy with the situation. It's just makes for, some entertaining gossip.
Did you hear his
in the bye week?
Did you hear his comment about like nice guys finish last in his interview? Oh
Yeah,
my
no.
gosh.
Nice
He
guys
was-
finished 10th, apparently.
Yeah.
He
I
was
think
wrong.
we just got the episode title right there.
There we go.
I think we just got the
Book
episode
it.
title. Yeah. Nice guys finished 10. I like
Book
it.
it.
I like it. All right.
Aston Martin. I feel like Aston Martin, they did okay, but it was just underwhelming. Like, I feel like they're nowhere right now. I don't really have anything else to say about them. And Steak is just continuing to shit the bed.
Brutal.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with those guys. They have like zero. I feel like everyone just is giving up until Audi comes in.
I feel like that a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've had that feeling for like almost this entire season. Actually, you know what? All of this entire season and most of last season, if I reflect back. So, yeah, as soon as Bottas started really putting, like when he put out his own calendar, I'm like, it's a wrap. Like, why is this guy even driving right now? And then he started a company where he had like, he's got, like a food truck. He's got like pizza oven food trucks that you bike pedal. And then he's got like a cheese thing that he's got so many things going on. Driving F1 is like the last thing on his mind.
Yeah, I don't think he's preparing himself for retirement at this point from because we don't know if he's going to get a seat. I wish he could get a seat next season. Just like maybe a final season for him, a send off, and then just like get into a good team and just like destroy the field again. But, yeah,
well,
we'll
Williams is coming back up in terms of talk for Bottas.
Yeah.
I'd really like to see him go to a team that cares a little bit. I think that would be nice. I think it would be good for him. I think he still has a lot to add, especially if you have someone like Albon in that other seat. I feel like that would make a really nice pairing, having someone that's got some seniority that can maybe, help develop that team, which seems to be moving in the right direction, but lots of work to do there.
Yeah, full circle for him. Like that's where he started. And his career there, that's fantastic. It's a good, really good narrative right there.
Absolutely. Coming up, we got the Spanish Grand Prix. We got Barcelona. Seems like a favorite track of almost everybody. It's entertaining, fast track. They used to use it for a lot of testing. What are we looking forward to in a couple of weeks? Drew?
I'm looking forward to seeing all of the top teams at their finest form because I want to see what those actual numbers and what the actual pace of the Ferrari compared to the Red Bull, compared to the McLaren, compared to the Mercedes. Like I want those four teams to be gunning it and on top form so that we can actually see an apples to apples on a track like this that everyone's comfortable and all the teams are familiar with. And the weather in theory should be pretty consistent and anything that they can account for now. So it'll just be like everyone banging their biggest guns to a gunfight. And that's kind of what I'm looking forward to seeing this race coming up. I guess we got a bye week next week, but yeah, coming up.
In my case, like I'm really looking forward to Mercedes specifically, to the upgrades that they've had for Canada. The pace that they've shown in fast track, like Barcelona's also a very, very fast track as well. Even the following race after that, then maybe getting ahead of myself in the Red Bull ring. But I also want to see how Max Verstappen and Team Red Bull, both Max and Checo, see how they pace themselves with this track too. Because the European leg is going to be an interesting few races. We have Barcelona, we have Red Bull Ring, we have Silverstone, Hungaro, and Spa. Those are fast tracks. And those are actual tracks that, Red Bull has dominated for the past few seasons. So specifically for this one, I want to see Mercedes, see if Ferrari can bounce back, but we'll see. I'm really looking forward to see what they've brought into the new package and the new upgrades that Mercedes has put in their cars.
Yeah, Drew, I think you both bring up really good points. So Drew, obviously this is going to be like an even playing field. Teams are very familiar with this track, so I think it'll help us get a good overview of like where teams are actually at. And Ed, I'm just happy that we're going to have 3 weeks in a row. I'm ready for some consistent week after week racing.
Hell yeah!
Because I feel like these bye weeks, these every 2 week business is not my jam. And we're back on European time, which means we can get back into my regularly scheduled Saturday, Sunday mornings, which is also key for me personally.
Thank you. Yes, yeah, I agree.
Oh, it absolutely.
I don't know if everyone else feels right. Like
I feel the same way.
I was in Montreal. It was fun. We had an amazing time. The race was great. But really, if I'm sitting at home, do I want to be watching a race at 2:00 in the afternoon on a Sunday? No. It's just not how it's done.
No,
you're chopping up the weekend. You're like destroying the weekend at that point. You don't have anything to do after that, and then you're just like stuck in limbo. Like, what now?
Yeah, it's a really awkward time actually. So yeah. I feel like Formula One has to figure that out. Everything should just be catered to the Eastern time zone now.
Yeah,
yes,
because
I agree. Of course, 100%.
Europe what?
Yeah,
Europe 100%. What? Boys, we skipped it last week because we were man down. Do we want to play Name That Sponsor? Does it work with just two of you here?
You know what? We can skip it this time because I don't want to get ahead of Thomas because that feels unfair. But we can do the mailbox box.
Oh yeah, let's do that.
We can do mailbox. Yeah. I mean, to be fair, he was like he was in last place by a lot, so I don't know if this week's going to really make a difference. But
that's also why he needs all the opportunities he can.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right.
All
right, mailbox box.
Let's get going. So Zashan from the Discord jumped in and he said, okay, are the Lewis Hamilton fans being set up for more heartbreak based on, Mercedes coming back? And while Lewis's race wasn't great, he did put the fastest time of anyone into those 3 quali sessions in Q2. So if he wasn't on the crappier of the 2 strategies, I guess he's just saying, are the Lewis fanboys being set up for another set of disappointment? So what do you guys got on that?
Ed, hold on. I need to switch hats. I got to get as much wear out of these $100 hats as I possibly can.
Let's use that as an opportunity to plug the YouTube channel and the Discord and the Instagram and all that stuff. Because if you're only listening to this on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you guys are listening to this, we do have a video. So if you are on Spotify, you can check out the video. YouTube, we got that too. We definitely do a bunch of good Insta stuff. So check us out on all the socials at F1 True North. So
I love that.
Right.
I love that. Go.
All right, so I'm gonna start us off. Lewis, I think right now, as a Lewis fan, you have to believe now more than ever, right? Gone are the easy days of walking into victories and having like a dominant car and blah, 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 blah. Like now, if you are a true fan, fanboy, fangirl, whatever it is, now is the time to show your colors and have faith in your boy. Champions are not about winning all the time. Champions are how you become winners. And right now, we get to live that story. And a lot of people that came into sport more recently, maybe they were Drive to Survive fans, maybe they're whatever, right? They came into an era where Lewis was like dominant, winning everything, and then not, right? Now we get to see the comeback. And I don't know about you guys, but that's kind of exciting. I am very excited for the day when he gets back on the podium and back in first place, because I feel like the amount of energy and time that we're investing into this comeback, whether it's with Mercedes or whether it's with Ferrari, is going to be the ultimate payoff. So are we setting ourselves up for heartbreak? Yeah, if you don't believe, if you were expecting results overnight and him to return to form with a car that's not there in the next few races, but like, stick with the man. I think he still has what it takes. You know, he got fastest lap, two races in a row, fastest lap. He was killing it in quali. You know, made some mistakes, admittedly, and strategy wasn't on his side. But if you can't take the heartbreak, just get out of the game. And I feel like I'm just rambling now, but I just feel so passionate about it. So
we can feel it too, Walker.
No, we feel it, man. Don't worry. Don't worry.
All right, I'm done. Move on.
Safe space.
What are you guys saying?
I'll take the next take stab at it. Let me preface that I name my youngest son Lewis, so that should say a lot already on how much of a fanboy I am.
That does trump almost anything. By the way,
that says everything. Yeah.
I got nothing.
I've actually met a son named Lewis. This is real. He's not fucking.
Yeah. So, are we being set up for heartbreak? When it comes to any type of sport, any type of competitive sport, you're always set up for heartbreak. With the showing of Lewis this weekend and the showing of Ferrari this weekend as well, I don't want to jinx it. I don't want to say anything about it. Y'all can do whatever predictions you want to do in your head. I still believe in Lewis. I know that Lewis is going to kill it in Ferrari. The season, he showed the pace. He showed the greatness that is Lewis Hamilton. And that's why I said I'm looking forward to the upgrades of Mercedes for Barcelona. Because you'll never know if the upgrades are there. He has the pace. Maybe he'll not just take it to George, but even take it to McLaren, even take it to Max Verstappen, even take it to both Ferraris. That's going to be in 2 weeks' time. So super excited, super pumped about it. Lewis is back just for the showing this weekend, and looking forward to the next few races for the European leg and how Mercedes will start to kind of bounce back.
All right. Well, I want to say thanks to Zashawn4469 for throwing out that question. But, my quick answer on that is, yeah, of course, he's going to be setting everyone up for heartbreak. Anytime you love a driver so much and someone has this air of greatness, getting into GOAT status, there's always an opportunity to be let down, right? So, eventually these guys all have to fade away at some point. And so I don't know what that's going to look like. Would I love Lewis to win a few more, whether it's here at Mercedes or what he's, retiring at Ferrari? Who knows what's going to happen? Maybe he doesn't retire at Ferrari. Maybe he goes to 4 more teams before he's done. I have no idea. But is it a chance for heartbreak? Yeah, 100%. So I don't know. That's where I'm going with that.
So I'm just going to end with a quote, because I feel like
It deserves an epic
It
ending like
deserves
that.
it deserves an
I
ending with
love
a
it.
quote.
I love it. I want to hear this. I want to hear this.
Disappointment is the price you pay for setting your sights too high. If you don't want to be disappointed, just aim for the middle, aim for the bottom. But that's not what we're doing here. That's not what he's doing here, right? Our expectations are high for a reason. And yes, it could come with great disappointment, but it could also come with great elation and celebration. I look forward to that.
Hell yeah.
And with that, we'll call it an episode. This has been Formula One True North. Don't forget to rate, subscribe, tell your friends, join the Discord. Lots of great discussion going on over there. Find us on Instagram, all the socials. And we'll be back next week. More Formula One. Ciao for now.
It's lights out and away we go.